Royal Guard, SAW. A faint glow slip out from beneath the king's towering throne, a glow that shouldn't exist in a room built on centuries of stone. As he stepped closer, the light pulsed like it was calling to him, revealing a hidden passage no guard was ever meant to discover. What he found below didn't just shatter the palace's oldest legends. It made the king himself collapse in terror, because some secrets buried beneath a throne are powerful enough to destroy the one who sits on it. The courtyard was silent now, yet the memory of footsteps echoed in the guard's mind, each strike against stone lingering like a ghostly drumbeat. Marble polished to a mirror sheen reflected the flicker of candlelight, stretching shadows across gilded columns that rose like silent sentinels. Outside, a soft breeze stirred the jasmine from the palace gardens, carrying scents that seemed almost alien in the stillness within. The hall was magnificent, suffocating even each ornate detail, a reminder of centuries of vigilance and ceremony. The royal guard moved along the corridor with measured precision. His boots, laced with decades of discipline, struck the marble in a steady rhythm. Yet tonight, he felt a disquiet he had never known before. A faint glow emanated from beneath the throne, a light that pulsed with unnatural insistence. Shadows twisted across the floor like living things, elongating, curling toward the anomaly as though aware that someone was watching. He hesitated, gloved hand resting on the hilt of his ceremonial sword, breath caught between duty and instinct. The king, prepared for the evening's ceremony, remained unaware. Soon, his voice would command the hall, rich with authority and tradition, each word echoing across centuries. To disturb that moment would risk scandal, yet ignoring the glow might betray every oath the guard had taken. Candlelight danced across carved cherubs frozen in eternal observance, and in their stillness the guard felt the weight of history pressing down. The anomaly was no ordinary misalignment. It demanded attention, patience, and discretion. The camera drifts along the polished floor, tracing the sweeping line of gilded railings, the statues of past monarchs, and tapestries woven with heroic deeds now long forgotten. A rustle breaks the silence, the guard's cloak brushing against marble, yet the hall remains otherwise motionless. He crouches slightly, eyes narrowing, every sense taut with anticipation. The light beneath the throne flares again, brighter now, like a heartbeat emanating from the very foundation of power itself. Duty warred with instinct. The guard's mind raced, alert the king, risk breaking ceremony, and perhaps invite censure, or investigate silently and shoulder the burden alone. The palace held centuries of unspoken rules, and each decision here would echo far beyond the corridor. Candle flames flickered as though acknowledging his indecision. Dust floated in quiet clouds, disturbed by the subtle movement of air, a dance of centuries, old particles bearing witness. The hall's silence became almost tactile. He could hear his own heartbeat, each thump amplified by the vast emptiness around him. He leaned closer, inspecting the throne's base, fingers brushing the edge of the polished marble. And then he saw it a seam, almost imperceptible, running the full length of the golden platform, hiding a secret that had escaped notice for decades. Footsteps echoed faintly from a distant corridor. Perhaps another guard or an attendant running late. The sound reminded him that ceremony approached and the king's patience would not endure indefinitely. Each second pressed him further into decision, every shadow seeming to grow teeth in the half-light. The grandeur of the hall, once comforting, now amplified tension, transforming beauty into an arena of moral and historical weight. A faint breeze wafted through a high window, carrying incense from the chapel. It brushed against his face, and for a fleeting moment he felt the immense gravity of duty. Centuries of monarchs, advisors, and courtiers had walked these halls, leaving traces of fear, ambition, and devotion behind. And the glow beneath the throne was more than a physical anomaly. It was a test, silent and enduring, meant to measure vigilance, loyalty, and courage. The guard steadied his breath. Hands gloved and precise, he brushed aside the ceremonial carpet, revealing threads of gold that had been polished for generations. Dust rose, catching the candlelight like tiny stars. Beneath, a faint metallic glimmer hinted at hidden mechanisms not just decorative, but functional, ancient, and deliberate. The soft creak of the throne's base sent a shiver through the hall. The anomaly was no longer subtle, it was alive. And the guard understood instinctively that tonight every decision, every movement, carried consequences that extended far beyond his own life. With a steadying breath, the guard resolved to investigate further. The light beneath the throne demanded answers, and the first steps toward discovery would test the very principles he had sworn to uphold. The guard's fingers lingered on the edge of the golden seam, tracing its faint metallic outline. Every muscle in his body tensed, ready for whatever might lie beneath. Candlelight flickered across the ornate carvings of the throne lions and eagles frozen in eternal vigilance, as if silently judging his hesitation. He inhaled slowly, allowing the scent of aged marble, wax, and faint iron to anchor him. The palace held its breath, waiting for the next move. Carefully, he lifted the first corner of the carpet. The fibers, stiffened by decades of polish and footfalls, resisted, releasing a faint, almost imperceptible squeak. Beneath it, the floor revealed a narrow outline of a trapdoor, edges gilded but worn by centuries of hidden motion. Dust motes floated like tiny lanterns in the wavering candlelight, as if celebrating the rediscovery of secrets long buried. He traced the outline with his fingertips, feeling the subtle grooves of ancient hinges beneath his gloves. A chill ran down his spine. The palace, magnificent in its daytime pomp, now felt oppressive in the quiet of night. Each shadow seemed to stretch longer, each whisper of air magnified. His training urged patience, his instincts screamed urgency. The anomaly was no accident. It had been placed, concealed, and preserved deliberately. Something lay beneath, and the weight of history pressed upon him. The monarch above was unaware, the ceremony approaching, yet the guard alone bore witness to what could shatter both tradition and trust. He knelt, pressing a gloved hand to the trapdoor. The hinges groaned softly, as though awakening after centuries of silence. Dust poured from the crack, dancing in the candlelight like ephemeral spirits. He hesitated for a fraction of a heartbeat, a moral question pressing on him with the weight of a crown. Reveal this immediately to the king, risk scandal and shame, or investigate in silence alone, guided by conscience and duty. The echo of footsteps in the distant hall reminded him that time was fleeting. Ceremony would begin. Decisions had to be made now. Finally, with deliberate precision, he lifted the trapdoor. The faint, metallic smell of old mechanisms mingled with the earthy scent of stone below. A subtle glow emanated from the chamber beneath, warmer now, pulsing faintly as if alive. His heart beat faster, each pulse echoing in his ears like a drum. The chamber was small, stone, walled with shelves lined in dust, covered scrolls, faded seals, and ceremonial relics. Centuries of hidden history had been preserved here, documents and artifacts that spoke of loyalty and betrayal, victories and compromises, secrets that should never have seen the light of day. The camera drifts slowly down, revealing each detail. A faded wax seal cracked along its edges, a ceremonial dagger sheathed in tarnished silver, and manuscripts that smelled of time itself. His hand brushed across one scroll, and the brittle parchment crackled under his touch. Letters, some faded almost beyond recognition, detailed the inner workings of palace hierarchy, rivalries, alliances, and decisions hidden from public record. The guard realized that this room was more than a storage chamber. It was a mirror reflecting the moral weight carried by the monarchy for centuries. A soft sound startled him, the distant echo of boots above, reminding him of the king's imminent presence. Each moment in this chamber was a risk. Yet curiosity, duty, and conscience demanded attention. He scanned the artifacts, noticing a folded document, its edges pristine compared to the decay surrounding it. As he unfolded it, the writing leapt out at him: names, dates, actions implicating someone high in the palace hierarchy in matters that would have rocked the court if revealed. His pulse surged, the moral dilemma crystallized. To expose it could save integrity but destroy lives. To conceal it could preserve stability but betray conscience. The air grew heavier as the candle light flickered above the trapdoor, shadows twisting along the stone walls. He felt the weight of centuries pressing down, the presence of ancestors who had walked these halls before him, who had made their own choices and faced consequences he would never fully know. Each artifact whispered its story, each scroll its silent warning. The glow beneath the throne seemed almost sentient now, urging vigilance, demanding discernment, revealing the fragile balance between authority and morality. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. He held the document with care, aware that his every movement was a step on a moral tightrope. The palace above remained oblivious, the ceremony nearing. And in that tension, he realized the truth. Duty was not blind obedience, nor mere adherence to protocol. Duty demanded courage, judgment, and the willingness to bear the consequences of choice. A faint draught whispered along the chamber's stone floor, rustling the scrolls. The guard straightened, gaze shifting toward the faint glow emanating from beneath a far shelf. Something else lingered in the shadows, perhaps another secret waiting to be uncovered, or a test of his resolve. The chamber felt alive, not with danger, but with moral expectation, history pressing down, waiting for someone to make a choice. He paused, breathing slowly, letting the enormity of the moment settle. Every instinct told him that what he had discovered could redefine loyalty, duty, and truth within these walls. The candlelight above flickered once more, illuminating his face, a face resolute, yet burdened by the weight of choice. For the first time, he understood that the palace was not just a seat of power, it was a crucible of moral and historical consequence. The guard's decision crystallized. He would descend carefully, catalogue the secrets, and weigh every revelation against duty and conscience. What lay beneath the throne was more than a light, more than an anomaly. It was a test of vigilance, of courage, of the moral fiber demanded by centuries of service. And he would meet it alone in the silence of history, with nothing but candlelight and conscience as witness. He stepped fully into the shadowy underthrown chamber, the glow revealing secrets long hidden, and felt the first tremors of a moral journey that would challenge loyalty, honor, and the very foundation of the monarchy. What he would uncover next would set the stage for revelations that could change the palace forever. The chamber beneath the throne was darker than the guard had anticipated, though the faint, pulsing glow beneath the trapdoor lit the stone walls in ethereal, shifting patterns. Dust hung thick in the air, disturbed by his careful steps, glittering faintly as it caught the light. The smell of aged parchment, wax, and cold stone was almost intoxicating, a tangible reminder of centuries of secrets preserved in silence. Every footfall echoed softly, reverberating like the heartbeat of history itself. He paused to take in the room fully. Shelves lined with scrolls and tomes stretched into shadow, stacked haphazardly but preserved as if by divine care. Sealed letters bore insignias from dynasties long dissolved, their colors faded yet commanding attention. A ceremonial dagger rested on a velvet cushion, silver dulled to gray by centuries, etched with symbols whose meaning had been lost to time. Every object here spoke of power, vigilance, and moral compromise. waiting silently for someone worthy of understanding. His fingers traced the edge of a faded scroll, brittle yet resilient under the touch of leather gloves. The writing, inked in careful script, chronicled decisions and decrees of monarchs who had long since vanished into memory. Names leapt from the page: ministers, generals, and courtiers, some praised for loyalty, others condemned for betrayal. The weight of history pressed on him. These were not just records, but moral judgments inscribed across decades. A faint creak above reminded him of the king's imminent ceremony, and the sense of urgency returned, pressing against his calm exterior. He knelt, moving a set of stacked manuscripts aside, revealing a narrow hatch embedded in the stone floor beneath the shelves. Its edges bore scratches, evidence of decades, perhaps centuries, of repeated, careful use. The glow from beneath the throne shimmered faintly, reflecting off metallic hinges. This was no ordinary storage chamber. It was a network of hidden passages and secret archives, a substructure of power and secrecy designed to safeguard, or perhaps conceal, truths the palace could not afford to reveal. The guard crouched lower, listening. The silence was thick, broken only by his own breathing and the faint hum of the light emanating from below. Candlelight from the trapdoor above cast long, wavering shadows, making the chamber appear larger, more intricate than it truly was. Every shadow seemed alive, and for a moment he felt the oppressive presence of the ancestors who had walked these halls before him, those who had placed these secrets carefully, weighing duty against desire, conscience against loyalty. He reached for the hatch, gloved fingers trembling slightly despite years of discipline. Lifting it revealed a narrow spiral staircase carved from cold stone, descending deeper into darkness. Each step he took seemed to swallow sound, as if the light and architecture above had no connection to this hidden underworld. The temperature dropped, moisture clinging to the walls, mingling with the scent of old scrolls and metal. This descent was no mere physical journey. It was a plunge into the moral heart of the monarchy itself. Dust swirled at the edges of his boots as he moved carefully, illuminating his path with the glow from above. Ancient locks, hidden latches, and false hinges appeared along the walls, intricate mechanisms designed to protect not just treasure, but truth. His eyes caught a faint inscription carved into a pillar. "Duty is tested in shadow." He paused, the phrase echoing in his mind, the weight of the centuries compressed into a single line. It was a warning. It was a challenge. At the base of the stairs, the chamber opened into a wider hall, low-ceilinged, lined with niches holding ceremonial relics, swords, maces, crowns, and seals, each marked with dates and names lost to ordinary memory. The air was thick with dust and anticipation. The glow beneath the throne pulsed faintly, reflecting off gilded edges, hinting at further secrets deeper in the structure. The guard's hand rested on the hilt of his ceremonial sword, not for combat, but for the steadying weight it provided against the enormity of discovery. He moved toward a stack of scrolls, carefully pulling them free. Their inscriptions spoke of past betrayals, clandestine alliances, and decisions taken to protect the monarchy from scandal or chaos. Some documents were faded beyond legibility. Others, like the one he had seen earlier, were pristine, preserved deliberately. Each piece seemed carefully chosen, as if the monarchy itself had decided which truths the world might never see. The light beneath the throne grew warmer, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. It revealed subtle details in the stone floor grooves that hinted at concealed compartments, faint scratches where mechanisms had moved countless times. The palace, so polished and orderly above, was a labyrinth of secrets below, a testament to centuries of human cunning, loyalty, and moral compromise. He unfolded another document, one stamped with an unfamiliar crest. The writing was precise, deliberate, chronicling a covert decision by a long, forgotten regent. Names, dates, actions, they all pointed to the calculated preservation of power over principle. The guard felt a chill. These were not just historical records, they were moral roadmaps instructing those who followed on what could be done to protect the throne and what could not. The line between right and expedient blurred in ink and parchment. A faint sound, like a whispered shift of air, drew his gaze to the far end of the hall. A narrow corridor, almost hidden, extended into darkness. The glow beneath the throne seemed to beckon him, urging further exploration. The guard's moral compass battled with instinct and duty. Each discovery deepened his understanding of the palace's fragile equilibrium. He realized that what he uncovered here could redefine loyalty, alter the course of justice, and challenge the very foundation of authority. The chamber seemed alive with anticipation. Every scroll, every relic, every carved groove held secrets, waiting for someone to bear witness. The guard straightened, taking a steadying breath. Candlelight above flickered, echoing through the stone stairwell, a silent reminder that the king remained unaware, perched above a legacy carefully guarded. This descent into the palace's hidden heart was as much about moral courage as it was about investigation. And in that quiet, tension-laden space, he understood the first true rule of the monarchy's shadowed underworld. Not all truths are meant for eyes above. Some must be discovered. Some must be preserved. Some must challenge the very principles by which duty and loyalty are measured. With each step deeper into the hidden archives beneath the throne, the guard prepared to uncover truths that could shake the palace's hierarchy. What he would find next was no longer historical curiosity, it was a moral challenge, one that could imperil both the monarchy and himself. The corridor at the far end of the chamber beckoned like a narrowing throat of history, shadowed and lined with relics whose meanings had been lost to time. The faint, pulsing glow beneath the throne illuminated the edges of stone, revealing subtle grooves in the floor, evidence of hidden mechanisms. Decades of carefully maintained secrets. Each step the guard took stirred dust, which hung in the air like a veil, refracting the faint light into ghostly patterns across the walls. He approached a low alcove, almost invisible in the dimness, where a single pedestal rested. Atop it lay a bound document, its edges crisp and deliberately preserved, unlike the fragile scrolls that surrounded it. The crest stamped on the cover bore a symbol he recognized, one belonging not to the monarchy itself, but to a powerful advisor whose influence had spanned decades. The implications pressed against him like the weight of the palace above. This was no ordinary record. It was evidence, potentially explosive, capable of reshaping the understanding of loyalty and authority within the palace walls. His gloved hands hovered over it for a long moment. He felt the pulse of the light beneath the throne seep into the chamber, as if urging him forward, demanding he bear witness to what had been concealed. Carefully, he opened the document. The ink was sharp, deliberate, chronicling decisions taken in secret actions by trusted advisors to manipulate succession, conceal betrayal, and protect personal ambition over royal integrity. Names leapt from the pages, some living, some long gone, their choices frozen in ink. Their moral weight etched into the palace's hidden archives. The guard's pulse quickened. The chamber around him seemed to tighten, walls closing in, shadows stretching, candlelight flickering across faces carved in stone above him. Every artifact in the room, every scroll and relic, felt suddenly accusatory, demanding judgment, bearing silent witness to the centuries of compromise and cunning that had kept the monarchy intact and fragile. The moral dilemma crystallized before him. reveal these truths, risking scandal, disgrace, and potential collapse, or safeguard them, preserving the illusion of order at the cost of conscience. He turned the pages slowly, noting passages that implicated advisors still in service, their reputations untarnished by public knowledge. One letter, sealed in crimson wax, detailed a covert decision to misrepresent a royal decree, a lie preserved for decades, its consequences quietly shaping the court, the guard's breath caught. This was no mere archive. It was a testament to the palace's hidden morality, the compromises that had allowed authority to endure. Yet some compromises, he realized, were more dangerous than the truth they sought to conceal. A faint sound echoed from the stairwell above. The king's voice would soon fill the halls with ceremony, his presence a reminder of the public's demand for order and the weight of centuries of tradition. The guard hesitated, heart thundering, aware that even a single misstep could betray everything. The documents in his hands pulsed with moral energy, each line a question, each name a test of loyalty. Duty demanded action, but conscience demanded judgment. And here, in the dim glow beneath the golden seat, the two were at war. He paused, scanning the chamber for further evidence, and discovered another secret compartment concealed in the floor. Sliding aside a carved stone panel, he revealed a small chest, its contents untouched by time. Within lay relics of ceremonial significance, a scepter, a medallion, and folded scrolls that appeared to be instructions for preserving discretion across generations. Each artifact radiated authority and subtle menace, reminding him that the monarchy's power had always relied as much on secrecy as on visibility. The guard's mind raced. Every object, every document was a piece of a puzzle, a historical map of loyalty, betrayal, and ambition. He realized that what he held could ignite a crisis, one that might challenge the palace's hierarchy and test the moral fiber of every courtier still loyal to the crown. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than the marble above, colder than the shadows that seemed to swallow the chamber whole. He carefully arranged the documents, glancing once more at the faint glow beneath the throne. The light seemed to pulse more insistently now, as though aware of his deliberation, demanding acknowledgement of what lay hidden. In that moment, the guard understood. The discovery beneath the throne was not simply historical. It was living, moral, dangerous, and necessary. To act or to remain silent would define him, his duty, and the future of the monarchy. A sudden shift in the shadows drew his attention. Movement, subtle yet deliberate, suggested that the chamber was not as empty as he had thought. His hand tightened around the ceremonial sword not for combat, but for the measure of resolve it provided. Whoever or whatever had left these secrets behind had anticipated discovery, had prepared for it. The chamber was a crucible, and he was the chosen witness, tested not by fire or steel, but by conscience and judgment. He unfolded another scroll, revealing instructions for safeguarding the monarchy's reputation at all costs. The writing was meticulous, coldly logical, and morally ambiguous. The guard's chest tightened with awareness. The palace had long survived not solely through virtue, but through the careful orchestration of secrecy, subterfuge, and ethical compromise. Here, beneath the golden seat, the moral architecture of the monarchy was laid bare, fragile yet enduring, like crystal balanced on stone. Hours seemed to stretch, each tick of the imagined clock resonating through the chamber like a pulse of fate. The guard catalogued every artifact, every document, committing details to memory, weighing the implications of exposure against preservation. He knew that the first confrontation with authority was inevitable, that the truths he had uncovered would demand acknowledgement, risk judgment, and test his own loyalty in ways the palace above could never imagine. And then he found it a final document, folded with meticulous care, bearing seals that indicated its connection to the highest offices in the palace. The content was direct, implicating a trusted advisor in actions that, if revealed, could destabilize the court. His hands trembled slightly. The moral crossroads had arrived. To protect the monarchy by concealing the truth, or honor duty and conscience by exposing it. The chamber beneath the throne seemed to hold its breath alongside him, the glow pulsing steadily, urging discernment, judgment, and courage. The guard rose, resolve hardening. The first confrontation with authority was no longer optional. The secrets beneath the golden seat demanded reckoning. What he would do next would not only test loyalty and conscience, but set the stage for a moral crisis that could shake the monarchy to its core. The corridors above were alive again with the soft rustle of ceremonial preparation. Candle flames flickered in the tall sconces, casting long, wavering shadows across polished marble floors. The echo of approaching footsteps reminded the guard that the king would soon be present, yet he still lingered in the shadows, documents clutched in gloved hands. Every detail of the palace seemed heightened tonight, the hush of courtiers moving in measured steps, the quiet shuffle of advisors reviewing ceremonial plans, the subtle metallic scent of ancient keys in the locks. The guard paused at the threshold of a dimly lit hall, its grandeur juxtaposed against his urgent purpose. Statues of kings and advisors loomed silently, their carved eyes seeming to follow him as he moved. The documents he carried were not merely records. They were evidence, fragile yet potent, implicating those whose loyalty was presumed unshakable. And yet, the palace's unspoken laws of discretion pressed upon him. One false move, and scandal could ripple through the corridors like wildfire. He approached a door slightly ajar, the council chamber where the king's most trusted advisors gathered. Voices murmured within, their tones deliberate, measured. He could not enter without notice, yet the urgency of the revelations beneath the throne demanded immediate attention. The moral tension pressed on him like stone, heavy and cold. To reveal too much too soon could endanger both the monarchy and himself. To delay could allow deceit and corruption to continue unchecked. Inside, advisors leaned over ledgers and parchments, their expressions meticulous masks of composure. One muttered, "The ceremony must proceed without interruption. Any deviation invites scrutiny." Another nodded, absently adjusting a seal, unaware that their own actions were chronicled in the documents now hidden in the guard's hands. The tension in the hall above mirrored the tension in his chest, both chambers alive with secrets, but only one contained the weight of undeniable truth. He found a shadowed niche near the chamber entrance and crouched low, listening. The conversation above touched on protocol, succession, and ceremonial order, the advisor's voices careful and deliberate. And yet, beneath every word, he sensed something unspoken: fear, ambition, and the delicate balancing act of self-preservation. The guard's pulse quickened. He realized the very people sworn to protect the king might betray him if opportunity or fear dictated. Loyalty, he understood, was conditional, shaped as much by circumstance as by oath. Finally, he whispered, low enough to carry only to himself, "I must choose carefully." Each syllable echoed in his mind, a mantra to steady resolve. He knew that entering the council chamber without preparation could provoke questions he could not answer. Yet lingering in silence could allow hidden deceit to continue, the moral consequences quietly accumulating. The palace, in its splendor, had become a labyrinth of ethical challenges, every corridor a test of judgment, every whisper a potential threat. He moved along the outer wall, glancing at portraits of kings past. Their eyes seemed to watch his every motion, carved and painted centuries ago, yet alive in memory and expectation. The glow of the hidden documents beneath the throne pulsed faintly through the floorboards, a reminder that history had not yet released its hold. He was no longer merely a witness. He was a custodian of truths that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy. A door opened nearby, and a servant emerged, candle in hand. The flame danced across the guard's face, revealing eyes steeled by duty, jaw set in determination. He stepped back into shadow, letting the servant pass, silently counting each breath. The palace's pulse seemed to quicken, the space between duty and conscience shrinking with every passing moment. The guard found another doorway, a private study used by one of the king's senior advisors. Inside, papers were scattered across a desk, inked in meticulous lines that chronicled court activities. The guard's eyes darted to a small stack of letters, noting the seals and dates. One, in particular, bore a mark identical to that on the document he had retrieved beneath the throne. His chest tightened. The connection was immediate and undeniable. The advisor above had been involved in acts the monarchy was never meant to know. He pressed his back against the wall, considering his options. Confrontation was inevitable, yet timing, precision, and discretion would dictate its outcome. Any misstep could allow the wrong faction to gain advantage, or worse, compromise the king's position. Morality and protocol were not aligned. They were diverging paths he would have to navigate with care. Hours seemed to stretch as he waited, listening to murmured conversation, footfalls, the distant clang of ceremonial preparation. He traced the layout of the study in his mind, memorizing details, mentally mapping escape routes, and imagining the dialogues he might have to enact. His breath echoed faintly in the corridor. Silence, for once, was almost a companion, heavy, dense, and morally charged. Then a realization struck him. Allies might not be allies at all. Every advisor he trusted could be complicit, every act of loyalty measured against self-interest. The moral weight of revelation pressed on him like the stone of the palace itself. Duty demanded vigilance, conscience demanded action, and yet neither could be exercised recklessly. He adjusted the documents in his hands, feeling the smooth weight of inked parchment against the leather of his gloves. Each letter, each scroll, was a moral trigger, a key to secrets that could unravel carefully constructed facades. The palace, for all its splendor above, was now a theater of shadows, whispers, and choices. He was no longer merely a guardian of the king's safety. He was a judge of truth and integrity. A soft sound, almost imperceptible, drew his gaze. A page shifted in the breeze from a nearby open window, the faint rustle echoing in the hall. The timing was perfect, yet the metaphor was unmistakable. Even the smallest movement could carry enormous consequence. He pressed himself tighter against the wall, listening, calculating, preparing for the first confrontation that the documents demanded. The moral dilemma crystallized. Act too soon, and the palace could erupt in scandal. Act too late, and loyalty would be meaningless, buried beneath deceit and silence. Shadows deepened, candlelight wavered, and the corridors themselves seemed aware of the weight pressing down. He was caught between protocol and conscience, loyalty and revelation, tradition and truth. The guard knew the first confrontation with authority was imminent. Secrets uncovered beneath the golden seat demanded reckoning, yet each choice carried peril. What he would do next, whom he would trust, whom he would challenge, would shape not only the fate of the monarchy, but the very measure of his own honor. The guard's shadow stretched along the corridor, moving with quiet deliberation as he approached the center of power, the king's advisors' chambers. Inside, muted voices exchanged careful words, polite yet sharp, each syllable carrying the weight of secrets. He could feel it in the air, tension, ambition, and fear, all coiled together beneath the gilded surfaces of the palace. Each step brought him closer to confrontation, yet the weight of protocol pressed down like cold stone. He entered cautiously, gloved hands slightly raised in a gesture of restraint. The advisors' heads lifted in surprise, their carefully cultivated masks flickering with the first hint of uncertainty. One spoke, voice smooth yet measured. "The night patrol returns early. Everything is as expected." The guard's reply was deliberate, controlled. "Not all is as expected. Some truths demand attention." The room fell into silence, the kind that presses against your chest, making every breath deliberate, every heartbeat audible. Documents were placed on the polished table, parchment edges revealing the glow of candlelight as evidence of secrets uncovered beneath the throne. Gasps were muted, yet perceptible. Eyes darted toward each other, calculating, fearful. Some advisors stiffened, masking alarm with composure. Others paled, recognizing that hidden decisions they had taken years ago were now exposed, their moral compromises brought into the light. The guard stood firm, voice steady. "What you conceal here could imperil the crown itself. I am obliged to report this." A senior advisor, face lined with the weight of decades, leaned forward, gaze sharp. "And what would you have us do? Expose these things to the king and shatter centuries of order, or bury them quietly as tradition demands?" His words were not accusatory, but a test, probing the guard's judgment and loyalty. The hall seemed to shrink around him, candlelight dancing across carved moldings, highlighting the silent judgment of the monarchy's past. The guard's pulse quickened. He knew that the first act of confrontation was more than procedural. It was moral, ethical, and fraught with personal risk. Silence stretched like a rope across the room, and the tension became almost tactile. Duty pressed against conscience, loyalty against truth. The moral crossroads he had anticipated in the underthrown chamber now loomed before him like a stone archway, a barrier and a passage all at once. One of the younger advisors shifted nervously, whispering, "Perhaps discretion is still the wiser path. The king cannot bear scandal now." But the guard's voice cut through the whisper, calm yet resolute. "Discretion at the cost of truth is betrayal, no matter how polite. I have witnessed evidence that cannot be ignored. It must be addressed." The room stiffened. He felt the weight of centuries of unspoken rules pressing down rules that had kept the monarchy intact, but at the price of integrity. He stepped closer to the table, unrolling the documents with careful precision. The seals, crests, and signatures reflected candlelight, each a testament to the delicate choreography of deception and duty. The advisors leaned in, reading silently, absorbing names, dates, and hidden decisions. Some clenched fists under the table. Others remained outwardly composed, but the tension radiating from them was unmistakable. History, hidden for decades, now pressed directly into the present, and the guard was its witness and arbiter. A faint creak from above reminded him that the king would soon arrive for the ceremony. The pressure increased. Every word spoken, every action taken, would carry immediate consequence. He felt the moral weight deepen. Revealing too much, too soon could trigger panic or rebellion. Revealing too little could allow betrayal to continue unchecked. His gaze swept the room, noting expressions: fear, guilt, calculation, loyalty, all swirling together like currents in a storm. Suddenly, one of the advisors spoke sharply, breaking the fragile silence. "Are you suggesting these revelations must reach the king?" The question was loaded, a probe of intention and judgment. The guard's response was measured. "It is not suggestion. It is obligation. The truth beneath the throne cannot remain hidden. It will define the path of the monarchy and the integrity of all who serve it." The words lingered, heavy as the palace stones themselves. The senior advisor's gaze hardened. "And if the king is unprepared? If revelation brings ruin?" The guard met his eyes evenly. "Then we bear witness and act with honor." That is the purpose of duty, not comfort, not avoidance, but moral courage. Loyalty is meaningless without it. The room seemed to shrink further, the weight of centuries of secrecy pressing down. The advisors realized that the hidden truths he carried were more than documents, they were catalysts of consequence. A soft shift in candlelight revealed another detail, a previously unnoticed seal, stamped in crimson wax, marking the connection between the hidden documents and current authority figures. The implications were immediate, moral, and dangerous. Every advisor's composure flickered, and the tension escalated. The guard recognized that trust was a currency more fragile than gold, and betrayal more likely than loyalty in moments of crisis. He took a deliberate step back, letting the documents rest on the table. His voice was quiet, resolute. The chamber beneath the throne has revealed what cannot be ignored. Each of you must decide where your loyalty lies, with convenience, with the crown, or with truth. Silence followed, a thick, oppressive pause that pressed against his chest. The moral choices of the past and present hung in balance, and the first confrontation with authority had reached its apex. A faint wind stirred a curtain in the corner of the room, as if the palace itself exhaled in anticipation. Every gaze was fixed upon him, calculating and wary. The guard understood that the next steps would not be procedural, but ethical, and that whatever choice was made here, the repercussions would ripple through the palace, affecting loyalty, authority, and history itself. The guard now stood at the moral and procedural crossroads he had feared. Every ally could betray, every secret could explode, and every decision carried weight beyond measure. The revelations beneath the throne had set a course that could either protect or destroy the monarchy, and the first true reckoning was only beginning. The palace, once luminous and commanding, now seemed burdened by shadow. Candlelight flickered across gilded columns, revealing faint cracks and the subtle dust of age settling upon perfection. The echoes of footsteps in the grand hall were uneven tonight, hesitant, betraying the usual rhythm of confidence. The king's ceremonial duties were poised to begin, yet an unfamiliar tension hung in the air, a weight, unseen but palpably present, pressing upon marble floors and painted ceilings alike. The guard moved alongside the corridors, every motion deliberate. His gloved hand brushed against the polished railings as he passed, each touch a reminder of the centuries of tradition that had been meticulously preserved. Yet beneath the gilded veneer, secrets stirred, hidden beneath the throne, within the walls, in parchments and relics that had waited silently for discovery. The documents retrieved earlier pressed in his mind like physical objects, their moral weight almost suffocating. He could feel the pulse of history beneath his feet, vibrating through the stone of the palace, whispering of betrayals and compromises long hidden. Above, the king's voice broke the quiet, reciting ceremonial phrases with practiced cadence. The tone was precise, commanding, yet the guard noticed subtle cracks, a hesitation here, a faltering inflection there. The monarch was unaware of the truths hidden beneath the throne, yet the palace itself seemed to conspire in revelation, shadows stretching longer, flickers of candlelight casting the familiar golden halls in a harsher, more accusatory tone. The grandeur of power was intact, but the moral foundation trembled. In the chamber beyond, the guard approached the king's private study, documents carried carefully, edges crisp against the leather gloves. He paused, listening to the soft rustle of parchment, the quiet footsteps of advisors scurrying through corridors, and the faint creak of the palace settling in its ancient foundations. Each sound was magnified, imbued with tension, as if building itself acknowledged the imminent collision of duty and truth. The glow beneath the throne pulsed faintly in memory, echoing in the guard's mind as he carefully laid the documents across a polished table. Wax seals caught the candlelight, reflecting off gold leaf and polished wood. Scrolls chronicled centuries of decisions, moral compromises, and covert actions, tracing a path of loyalty intertwined with deception. Each line of ink seemed alive, whispering of consequences yet to be faced, of actions hidden from the king, and of the fragile balance of power now imperiled. King entered quietly, his gaze sweeping over the room with the same composure he had mastered over decades. Yet even he could not escape the tension that had begun to seep into every corner of the palace. The guard stepped forward, posture formal, voice steady. "Your Majesty, the chamber beneath the throne has revealed truths that demand your attention." The king's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of apprehension crossing the otherwise composed expression. Documents were unfolded slowly, inked lines reflecting candlelight. The king's gaze, once steady, faltered slightly as he read names, dates, and decisions that had remained hidden for decades. Advisors implicated in covert actions now confronted the weight of revelation. Ceremonial relics and sealed letters carried silent judgment. The camera drifts slowly, capturing each subtle inflection in the king's features: a tightening jaw, a furrowed brow, a fleeting shadow of disbelief. While the guard watches silently, a sentinel to both history and morality. The chamber seemed to shrink, walls pressing inward as the magnitude of revelation unfolded. The king's voice, when it finally emerged, was quiet, deliberate, and tinged with disbelief. "All these years. And this is what we preserved beneath the throne." The words lingered, echoing in the high-ceilinged hall, carrying not accusation, but the weight of centuries of responsibility suddenly laid bare. The moral and institutional legacy of the monarchy was no longer abstract. It was immediate, tangible, and impossible to ignore. The guard observed the subtle transformation in the king, the composed authority beginning to fracture under the weight of hidden truth. Every artifact, every document, every shadow in the chamber reflected centuries of carefully concealed compromise. The monarch's gaze swept the room, absorbing evidence of betrayal, loyalty, and ethical ambiguity, and for the first time, the veneer of majesty seemed fragile, almost mortal. A faint rustle from a nearby desk drew attention. Sealed letters and ceremonial directives lay scattered, as if anticipating discovery. The king's fingers brushed over the parchments with reverence and disbelief, tracing inked lines that recorded choices made in secrecy, choices that had preserved stability at the cost of transparency. The camera pans across the table, capturing each detail: red wax seals cracked with age, faded handwriting, symbols of authority now imbued with moral weight. The king's breathing deepened. Silence stretched in the room like a living presence, punctuated only by the faint flicker of candlelight. He seemed aware, perhaps for the first time, of the cumulative burden of history, and the guard watched as the monarch's composed demeanor began to crack. The palace, so long a symbol of unassailable order, revealed itself now as a crucible of moral compromise. In the quiet, the guard reflected on the precarious balance he had maintained. Loyalty, duty, and conscience intersected here in ways impossible to reconcile fully. The documents had forced revelation, but they also demanded action, a choice between enforcing protocol and confronting history. Every shadowed corner of the chamber seemed to mirror the moral tension pressing in from above and below. The king's voice, quiet yet heavy, broke the silence. "So much of what we call stability is built on lies." The words lingered like a tolling bell. The moral gravity of centuries pressed upon the room, and the guard felt, with sudden clarity, the immense psychological toll of secrets long preserved. The palace, for all its splendor, had concealed truths too heavy for routine ceremony, and now those truths had emerged, demanding acknowledgement and reckoning. The king's first cracks in composure had begun, and the weight of centuries of secrecy now threatened to consume both past and present. The guard watched, aware that the next moments would test every principle, every loyalty, and every moral fiber within the palace walls. What would unfold next would force decisions that could not be undone. The king's composure continued to fracture, each moment in the chamber layering disbelief over centuries of cultivated authority. Candlelight flickered across his features, casting harsh shadows that exaggerated the deep lines now etched by revelation. The palace, so often a stage of ceremonial grandeur, now felt like a hall of judgment, the walls silent witnesses to betrayal and moral compromise. The guard remained close, a sentinel observing the slow erosion of majesty beneath the weight of truth. Documents and relics lay scattered across the table, letters sealed in red wax, ceremonial directives annotated in ink that had long faded to brown, and scrolls chronicling decisions made in secrecy. Each item was a testament to centuries of moral ambiguity, choices taken in the name of loyalty but fraught with ethical compromise. The king's fingers traced the inked lines with reverent disbelief, stopping over passages that implicated advisors still in service, their loyalty now cast in shadow. Every decision we made, every action we believed was righteous. The king's voice faltered, a tremor betraying the psychological toll, was measured against secrecy, not truth. He paused, scanning the room as if the walls themselves had betrayed him. The guard, silent, noted the subtle tightening of the monarch's jaw, the flicker of his gaze toward the documents beneath the throne. The weight of hidden history pressed like a physical force, bending the light and air within the chamber. Outside, the corridors remained pristine, echoing the illusion of stability above. Yet within the chamber, time seemed suspended, each heartbeat magnified by the gravity of revelation. The king's advisors, summoned reluctantly, entered the room, their faces masks of composure that barely concealed apprehension. They hesitated at the sight of scattered documents, their minds racing to anticipate consequences they had long avoided. Every motion, every glance, was measured against centuries of unspoken rules. The senior advisor, face lined with decades of loyalty and ambition, stepped forward, voice low but steady. Majesty, discretion has always been the shield of the crown. To expose these truths, he paused, gaze flicking to the documents may unravel the stability we fought to preserve. The king's eyes, sharp despite the weight of revelation, met his, and to conceal them, he replied, voice cold yet measured, is to betray everything we claim to serve. The room seemed to hold its breath, every shadow leaning in, every candle flame still, as if aware that the next words would shape the palace's future. The guard observed the subtle interplay, aware that the moral architecture of the monarchy was now exposed. Loyalty was no longer abstract. It was tangible, tested against truth and consequence. The advisor's measured composure faltered as the king's gaze hardened, scanning names, dates, and actions that had remained hidden for generations. Each revelation cut deeper, unearthing betrayals layered beneath ceremonies, silences, and traditions meticulously maintained. He picked up one letter, the crimson wax still intact, and held it between gloved fingers. The contents implicated a trusted advisor in decisions that endangered the monarchy's integrity, choices hidden beneath the guise of duty. The senior advisor swallowed, recognizing the inevitability of reckoning, the moral calculus of centuries balancing loyalty, preservation, and truth now rested in the chamber like a palpable presence. The king's eyes, steadying, met the guards with an unspoken acknowledgement. The choice between enforcing protocol or confronting history was imminent. The room grew heavier, the candlelight dimming slightly as though in sympathy with the gravity of revelation. Each scroll, each relic, seemed to breathe under scrutiny, whispering of the consequences that had lain dormant. The guard moved quietly, placing documents carefully, ensuring their integrity. Every movement carried both procedural and moral weight. Even the smallest misstep could tip the balance between stability and chaos. The king's voice broke the thick silence once more. These decisions, these compromises, have been hidden from me, yet they shape everything. What legacy have we preserved, if not one built on silence and concealment? The words echoed through the high-ceilinged chamber, reverberating off marble and wood, and landing with unyielding gravity upon the observers. The guard felt a shiver of recognition. The palace was no longer a place of ceremonial theatre. It had become a crucible testing conscience, loyalty, and the endurance of moral courage. A scroll, slightly rolled and tucked beneath a ceremonial scepter, caught the king's attention. He unrolled it slowly, inked lines detailing covert actions taken in the name of stability. The camera pans across his features, disbelief, dawning comprehension, and finally, quiet, measured sorrow. Each revelation was a fissure, fracturing the image of perfect majesty. The monarchy, for all its grandeur, was vulnerable not merely to outside threats, but to the compromises hidden in its own foundation. The guard watched as the king's hands trembled slightly, brushing over the documents as if to absorb the weight of centuries. Every decision documented here had consequences reaching into the present. The room, suffused with candlelight and the soft scent of aged parchment, seemed to hold its breath alongside them. Each observer, advisor, and sentinel alike felt the moral gravity pressing down, a silent chorus of history demanding recognition. The senior advisor finally spoke again, voice quiet yet firm. "Majesty, these revelations. They challenge everything we know. What would you have us do?" The king's gaze swept the chamber, meeting the eyes of each advisor, before resting finally on the guard, whose steadfast presence had been constant through the night's revelations. "We must confront history," he said, voice low but resolute, "not to punish, but to acknowledge, not to destroy, but to preserve integrity where we can." A hush fell over the chamber, the weight of centuries crystallized in a single moment. The guard felt the enormity of the task ahead, enforcing protocol while honoring truth, balancing discretion against the necessity of moral reckoning. The palace, magnificent above, now revealed its fragile moral architecture below. Each decision would ripple outward, reshaping loyalty, trust, and the understanding of what it meant to serve the crown. The king's first collapse of composure had given way to resolve, yet the moral and institutional consequences of revelation had only begun. The guard understood that the next steps would test loyalty, honor, and conscience alike, and the decisions made now could not be undone. What followed next would demand courage beyond protocol, confronting history itself to preserve the monarchy's fragile integrity. The palace awoke with a quiet tension, the echoes of revelation still lingering in its halls. Candlelight reflected off polished marble floors, glinting softly on gilded balustrades, yet the grandeur felt subdued, muted by the weight of recent truths. The king, seated at his private study, carried a measured calm that belied the storm of realization beneath his composed exterior. History had been confronted, compromise acknowledged, and the consequences of secrecy laid bare. The guard moved carefully along the corridors, gloved hands resting lightly on the railing. Each step was deliberate, as if the very floors themselves required respect after the night's revelations. The palace, for all its ceremonial splendor, seemed quieter now, more intimate, the shadows less threatening yet still laden with significance. Every room he passed held a reminder. Loyalty and duty, honor and discretion had been tested, and balance between them was fragile, yet enduring. He paused outside the council chamber, listening to the soft murmur of voices within. Advisors, once rigid in protocol, now spoke with measured humility, their conversations weaving acknowledgement with prudence. The documents retrieved from beneath the throne had shifted the dynamics of power, yet the monarchy had not collapsed. The king's authority remained intact, but tempered by understanding, guided by conscience as much as tradition. The guard knew that the careful management of this knowledge would determine the future of the palace, and his role, silent but essential, remained central. Inside the chamber, the king reviewed the documents again, not with the shock of discovery, but with a deliberate eye, weighing each name, each decision, against the moral and institutional framework of the monarchy. The camera drifts slowly across the table, capturing wax seals, inked signatures, and ceremonial directives, all illuminated in soft candlelight. Each artifact was a reminder that integrity could coexist with tradition if one had the courage to confront history without fear. The guard entered quietly, standing at attention, yet relaxed in the knowledge that his presence was both necessary and respected. The king looked up, voice steady and deliberate. "You have fulfilled your duty beyond expectation." These truths, they required courage to reveal and courage to witness. The words, measured yet deeply personal, resonated through the chamber. The guard inclined his head, silent acknowledgement of the weight of service and the quiet heroism of those who act not for recognition, but for principle. Outside, the palace corridors were filled with subtle movement, advisors reconciling with their own moral choices, servants carrying out duties with renewed precision, and courtiers observing the steady restoration of order. The guard's presence remained a silent anchor, a reminder that loyalty was not only about obedience, but about moral courage in the face of truth. Every detail, from the polished floors to the flickering candlelight, reflected a palace slowly reconciling with its past, finding balance between authority and conscience. The king rose, walking slowly to the center of the chamber, pausing to examine the artifacts from the underthrown archives. The ceremonial scepter, the medallions, and the scrolls now symbolized not secrecy or power alone, but responsibility, wisdom, and the acknowledgement of human imperfection. He looked to the guard, voice softened. "History is heavy, but it must be carried, not ignored. Today, we have done what is right, not easy, but right." The guard, observing the monarch's composure, understood the quiet significance of the moment. Loyalty had been preserved, not through blind obedience, but through integrity, discretion, and moral discernment. The palace itself seemed to exhale, shadows softened, and candlelight danced gently across the walls as if celebrating the restoration of equilibrium. Every choice, every action, now carried the imprint of deliberate courage, and the weight of duty was shared between the king and those who served him faithfully. He walked through the halls, pausing at doors where subtle gestures of acknowledgement were exchanged, nods of respect from advisors, quiet glances of understanding from courtiers. The palace, once a theater of shadowed secrecy, had begun to reclaim its dignity. Each artifact, each document had played its part, but it was the moral courage of those who had witnessed and acted that restored equilibrium. The guard reached the chamber overlooking the main hall, observing preparations for the ceremonial audience. The king moved with deliberate calm, embodying authority tempered by moral clarity. The documents beneath the throne had shifted the palace's inner balance, but now stability was restored not through ignorance, but through acknowledgement. Every observer, from the highest advisor to the silent servant, felt the subtle pulse of restored order, the quiet reward of fidelity, integrity, and courage. A soft hush fell as the king addressed the assembly, voice steady, calm, and dignified. He spoke of duty, responsibility, and honor not in reprimand, but in quiet acknowledgement of shared moral weight. The guard listened, knowing that this was not a ceremonial flourish, but the embodiment of resolution, the careful reconciliation of history with conscience. Every syllable, every pause, reinforced the lessons learned in the shadows beneath the throne. Order had been restored, and the palace reconciled with its past, but the journey of duty and moral responsibility was far from over. The guard understood that loyalty and courage were not measured in moments of triumph, but in quiet acts of vigilance and moral discernment. What remained now was reflection on legacy, conscience, and the silent heroism that had preserved both the monarchy and honor. The palace settled into a quiet rhythm, its corridors filled with the soft echoes of restored order. Candlelight shimmered across polished marble, casting gentle reflections on gilded banisters and tapestries that had witnessed centuries of history. Yet beneath this calm, the weight of the night's revelations lingered, the moral gravity of secrets uncovered. Compromises revealed and loyalty tested remained palpable in every shadowed corner. The king moved with deliberate care through the private chambers, reviewing documents that had once threatened to fracture the monarchy. His expression was calm, but the guard could read the deep comprehension in his eyes. Here was a ruler tempered not by ceremony or authority alone, but by the clarity that comes from confronting hidden truths. Each scroll and relic, carefully restored to its place, now carried new significance: responsibility, integrity, and acknowledgement of human fallibility. The guard remained nearby, silent yet vigilant. His duty was no longer simply to protect the king from external threats, but to uphold the fragile moral equilibrium now restored within the palace. Each step he took echoed softly along marble floors, a measured rhythm mirroring the careful balance between conscience and protocol. Loyalty had been tested, courage exercised, and discretion preserved, not through suppression, but through deliberate acknowledgement of truth. In the council chamber, advisers moved with renewed purpose, their demeanor tempered by humility and reflection. The document beneath the throne had revealed betrayal and compromise, yet the king's measured approach emphasized restoration over retribution. The guard observed each interaction with quiet approval. Subtle gestures of acknowledgement, silent nods, and soft glances conveyed understanding without ceremony or fanfare. The palace was no longer merely a theater of power. It was a space of moral reconciliation. The king approached the central table, arranging documents with deliberate care. Each artifact, ceremonial scepters, medallions, scrolls, was positioned to reflect not authority alone, but weight of responsibility now acknowledged. The guard noted the precision, the ritual of careful restoration, and the dignity that accompanied each movement. Authority was no longer a mask, but a conscious act grounded in integrity and moral clarity. A soft knock at the door interrupted the quiet. A senior advisor entered, voice measured. "Majesty, the palace responds to your guidance. Order is maintained, and the council acknowledges its responsibilities." The king's gaze lifted, steady yet reflective. "Good," he replied. "Loyalty and honor are not merely titles. They are actions, visible only to those willing to see beyond ceremony." The guard's posture remained formal, yet he allowed a slight exhalation, a recognition that the moral weight had been managed successfully. Outside, corridors echoed with the subdued activity of servants and courtiers, each carrying out duties with renewed attention to discretion and integrity. The guard's presence, steady and unwavering, ensured that this equilibrium persisted. Shadows softened, light shimmered across the marble, and even the faint drafts moving through the palace seemed imbued with a sense of restored balance. Every corner of the building whispered of vigilance, moral courage, and the silent heroism that had preserved both the monarchy and honor. The king paused at a window, looking across the palace grounds where dawn light began to touch the edges of trees and fountains. His expression was calm, reflective, and tempered by the understanding of history's weight. The guard stood silently nearby, aware that the palace's restored order was only as strong as the principles guiding it. Loyalty, discretion, and courage had been exercised not with fanfare, but with deliberate, measured care, the quiet acknowledgement of duty fulfilled. A brief consultation followed with the advisers, conducted not in haste, but in solemn recognition of responsibility. Plans were made to maintain discretion, to preserve order, and to honor loyalty, while ensuring that the moral lessons of the night were not forgotten. Every word spoken carried weight. Every decision was deliberate. The palace had survived revelation without collapse, not through avoidance, but through the careful exercise of integrity, courage, and judgment. Finally, the guard moved through the corridors, pausing at vantage points that allowed him to observe the palace in its restored dignity. Candlelight shimmered across floors, walls, and ceilings. The once oppressive shadows had softened, now reflecting the balance between authority and conscience. His mind traced the steps taken, the choices made, and the silent acts of heroism that had preserved both the monarchy and moral order. Duty had been exercised fully, yet quietly, without spectacle, the kind of heroism that remained largely unseen, yet profoundly consequential. The king returned to his private chambers, documents arranged, scepters and medallions restored, scrolls carefully returned to their archival positions. He turned briefly to the guard, voice quiet but steady. "Your vigilance has preserved more than the crown tonight. You have preserved honor itself." The guard inclined his head in acknowledgement, understanding that the weight of responsibility was shared, and that duty exercised with integrity carried a resonance far beyond ceremony or authority. Order was restored, and the palace reconciled with its past. The night of revelations had ended. But the lessons endured. Loyalty was measured in courage, honor required discernment, and the silent acts of those who serve preserve both history and conscience. The palace would continue, yet the memory of this reckoning would linger, a quiet light of redemption, illuminating the paths of duty and fidelity. The palace was quiet now, yet the silence was heavy with memory. Candlelight flickered softly across the polished floors, illuminating gilded moldings and tapestries whose stories stretched back centuries. The guard walked slowly along the corridors, his footsteps almost imperceptible, each one a measured echo of duty fulfilled and conscience tested. The grandeur of the palace remained, but it felt different, softer, contemplative, as though it had absorbed the weight of truth and was breathing gently in its aftermath. He paused at the threshold of the grand hall, where the golden throne gleamed under the gentle light. Beneath it, the chamber that had once held secrets now lay quiet, undisturbed but never forgotten. The documents, relics, and scrolls that had carried centuries of moral compromise had been carefully restored, their truths acknowledged, contained. The glow that had first drawn his attention seemed now symbolic, a quiet reminder of hidden light, the weight of knowledge, the presence of conscience, and the responsibility of those who bear it. The guard reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Loyalty had demanded courage, duty had required discernment. Honor had been tested against the shadows of secrecy. Every choice, every measured act of vigilance had contributed to the preservation of the monarchy, and yet he knew that the preservation of order had come at a moral cost, quietly borne in the corridors and chambers that few would ever see. He moved through the palace with deliberate care, observing familiar spaces anew. The council chamber, once tense with revelation, now seemed subdued, its air still heavy with reflection. Advisors moved with calm attentiveness, aware that their decisions carried lasting moral significance. The palace had been reconciled with its past, but the memory of choices, compromises, and courage lingered, quiet yet palpable, like a soft light lingering after sunset. The guard's gaze drifted to the king, seated in private contemplation. The monarch's expression was serene yet introspective, the weight of history evident in the lines of his face. He traced the artifacts before him, scepters, medallions, and scrolls, not merely as symbols of power, but as reminders of responsibility and the moral consequences of authority. The king had endured the reckoning of revelation with dignity, balancing order and truth with deliberate care. Outside, the corridors were empty, yet alive with the memory of activity, footsteps that had carried urgency, whispers that had revealed secrets, and gestures of courage that had preserved both the crown and conscience. The palace itself seemed to hum with quiet acknowledgement, its walls and floors imbued with the moral weight of the events that had unfolded. The guard moved slowly, reflecting on the unseen acts of heroism, the courage in silence, and the patience that duty often demands. He paused before the grand window overlooking the palace grounds. Dawn light spilled across the gardens and fountains, illuminating the world with a soft, forgiving glow. The experience beneath the throne, the confrontation with advisors, and the king's reconciliation had left indelible impressions, not of grandeur or ceremony, but of moral clarity and vigilance. The palace would continue to function, yet the lessons of conscience, courage, and loyalty would remain, quietly shaping every step of those who served within its walls. The guard's thoughts turned inward, meditating on his own role. Duty had demanded action, loyalty had demanded vigilance, honor had demanded discernment. And yet, in this quiet aftermath, he recognized that true heroism was often unseen, measured not in accolades or recognition, but in the patient, deliberate preservation of truth, conscience, and order. The light he had seen beneath the throne now seemed emblematic of this quiet heroism, subtle, enduring, and profoundly significant. He traced his fingers along the railing, feeling the smooth marble beneath his touch, a tactile reminder of centuries of history and human choice. Every document restored, every secret acknowledged, and every decision weighed carefully had contributed to the preservation of legacy. The palace, once a theater of secrecy and ceremonial precision, had become a space of reflection, moral reckoning, and deliberate integrity. The guard paused once more at the throne, observing the quiet light that shimmered across its gilded surface. It was no longer a symbol of secrecy, but of responsibility, a reminder that every act of vigilance, every measured choice, and every courageous decision leaves a subtle yet enduring imprint. History, authority, and conscience coexist in delicate balance, and it is those who serve in silence who ensure that equilibrium is preserved. The palace rested in quiet dignity, yet the memory of revelation and moral reckoning lingered like a silent light. The guard understood that duty and conscience were intertwined, that loyalty required courage, and that true legacy is shaped not by spectacle, but by the quiet acts of those who protect both crown and conscience. What other truths linger where sunlight never reaches remained an unspoken question, a quiet call to vigilance and reflection. The palace remained bathed in the soft glow of dawn, its corridors quiet yet resonant with the weight of memory. Candlelight had been replaced by the gentle sweep of morning across polished marble floors, gilded banisters, and tapestries that told stories centuries old. The guard walked alone, each step deliberate, the echo of boots against stone a rhythm of reflection. Every corner of the palace seemed infused with history, every shadow a reminder of choices made, secrets revealed, and duties faithfully executed. He paused once more before the golden throne, its presence no longer merely ceremonial, but symbolic of responsibility, conscience, and the endurance of moral vigilance. Beneath it lay the chamber that had long held hidden truths, now silent yet ever potent, a space where history had been confronted and reconciled. The guard's eyes traced the contours of the throne, the intricate carvings, and the faint glimmer of light reflecting off polished surfaces. That light, first noticed in fear and curiosity, now felt emblematic, a quiet beacon of awareness, moral courage, and enduring duty. Memories of the night's revelations swirled in his mind, the documents beneath the throne, the confrontations with advisors. The king's quiet reckoning each moment had tested loyalty, courage, and conscience. He understood now that legacy was not a matter of ceremonial grandeur or historical pride, but of moral integrity quietly preserved. Every decision, every act of vigilance had ripple effects beyond the immediate, shaping not only the present but the enduring memory of the monarchy. The guard moved through the palace corridors, observing familiar spaces with a renewed perception. The council chamber, once heavy with tension and the weight of revelation, now exuded a calm dignity. Advisors moved with deliberate care, aware that their choices carried moral significance beyond procedure. Even the smallest gestures, the careful arrangement of documents, the respectful handling of relics, the subtle acknowledgement of service contributed to the quiet restoration of order and honor. He reached the grand window overlooking the palace gardens. Morning light bathed the fountains and lawns in a gentle glow, illuminating dew-laden leaves and the first fluttering of birdsong. The world outside reflected a promise of renewal, yet inside, the lessons of the past night remained vivid. Duty was more than obedience, loyalty was more than protocol. Integrity, courage, and quiet vigilance defined the true guardians of the monarchy. The palace itself seemed to breathe, a silent acknowledgement of these truths, its walls infused with the weight of conscience upheld. The guard's thoughts returned. The king, seated in reflective solitude, surrounded by the artifacts and documents of history. Authority, once perceived as ceremonial power, was now inseparable from responsibility, moral judgment, and awareness of the consequences of secrecy. The monarch's quiet composure was a testament to understanding, tempered by the events beneath the throne. It was a balance carefully maintained, a fusion of duty, conscience, and courage, and the guard recognized that the preservation of such balance required vigilance as much as strength. He walked slowly along the corridors, noting the subtle transformations in the palace. Shadows were less oppressive, candlelight seemed warmer, and the space itself carried a gentle gravity, the weight of decisions made, of history acknowledged, and of moral courage quietly exercised. The guard reflected on his own role, the silent, uncelebrated heroism of those who serve, the invisible acts that preserve integrity and honor, and the recognition that legacy is often shaped not by grand gestures, but by measured, deliberate action in the shadows. Pausing at the chamber that had contained the underthrown documents, he traced the faint outline of the trapdoor, now closed yet symbolically open to memory. Every scroll, letter, and seal had told a story of hidden decisions, moral compromise, and the courage required to confront truth. The guard understood that the palace, in all its grandeur, existed not merely as a seat of authority, but as a living testament to the choices of those who safeguarded integrity over convenience, conscience over comfort, and loyalty over personal gain. He knelt briefly before the throne, eyes tracing the faint patterns of light and shadow. The glow beneath it had been a literal signal of hidden truth. Now it felt like a metaphor, a silent illumination of moral clarity, the quiet presence of conscience, and the enduring weight of responsibility. The guard recognized that legacy is not preserved in moments of ceremony or spectacle, but in the patience, courage, and vigilance exercised away from the gaze of the public. Rising, he walked slowly through the palace, observing the traces of human presence. A carefully folded document, a medallion returned to its case, a candle still smoldering with the warmth of recent action. Each small detail told a story of moral reconciliation and the deliberate exercise of judgment. The palace, though grand, now felt human-shaped not only by authority, but by the conscientious acts of those who understood the fragile balance between duty, loyalty, and conscience. The guard paused once more at the window overlooking gardens. The first sunbeams reflected off fountains and leaves, illuminating the palace in soft, golden light. It was a light that had once revealed hidden truths, and now seemed to symbolize enduring awareness, moral vigilance, and the quiet heroism of those who preserve both crown and conscience. History, he understood, is preserved not by power alone, but by the steadfast courage of those who serve in shadows, bearing witness to truth without expectation of recognition. The palace rested in serene dignity, a living testament to duty fulfilled and conscience honored. The guard stood silently, aware that the lessons of loyalty, courage, and moral vigilance would endure far beyond this moment. And as sunlight touched the gilded throne, a silent question lingered in the corridors where shadows once held secrets. What other truths linger where light has yet to reach?